Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Carson Wagner Show. The government is back open after 41 days. In the longest shutdown in American history, we just went through it, and the government is back open. On Sunday night, the Senate came out of closed-door negotiations. John Thune, the other leaders of the Republican Party, and the leaders of the Democratic Party in the Senate, and they came together. They worked on a solution, essentially, to get the government back open. After several hours of closed-door negotiations, they were able to reach a deal and convince 5 more Democrats to come over, and those 5 Democrats were promised in return a future vote on ACA subsidies later on in December, and those 5 Democrats did come over, and they did start voting yes on the continuing resolution that the Senate and the House have been bickering about for the past 40 days. Because of that, they already had 55 votes. Several Democrats, I believe the number is 3, had already come over, plus those 5, gave them enough votes to break the filibuster. It was an exactly 60-40 vote. They voted once on Sunday, it passed. They voted again on Monday, and it passed the Senate, and then it went to the House. The House voted yesterday, and of course passed. The House has voted yes on every continuing resolution that it sent to the Senate so far, so there was no expectation there that it would fail, but it did pass, and then Trump promptly signed it. Federal workers are now getting paid. Flights are resuming, and the crisis is over. Here's the punchline, and here's the takeaway. Democrats caved. They got literally nothing. Okay, I'm going to break down what just happened because it was a masterclass in negotiation versus complete Democrat failure. Let's get into it. So here's the facts. Here's what passed. The continuing resolution, and again, in case anyone was wondering, a continuing resolution is this basic, simple bill. When the government can't agree on an appropriations bill to fund the government, what they do is vote on a continuing resolution. Essentially, a continuing resolution says, until we can agree on an appropriations bill, let's just keep funding the government at the current level so everything will remain in operation and we're good to go until we can agree on an appropriations bill. That's what a continuing resolution is. That's what they've been trying to pass this entire time. They did pass this continuing resolution just a few days ago, and it funds the government through January 30th. Okay, it includes full year funding for agriculture, military, veterans, etc. 8 Senate Democrats broke ranks, 5 of which broke ranks on Sunday night. Durbin, King, Hassan, Shaheen, Cortez Masto, Rosen, Fetterman, and Kaine. Here's what the Democrats got. They got a promise of a vote on ACA subsidies by mid-December. Now remember, the reason Democrats were holding the whole process up in the first place was because they wanted a vote on ACA subsidies. What are ACA subsidies? They're essentially free healthcare for anybody who's on welfare or they need problems, they've got problems and they're not able to pay for it by going to the doctor. So they can get this stuff paid for by the government, it's welfare essentially, by going through Obamacare. That's what ACA subsidies are. Subsidies just essentially free money you get from the government. Of course, nothing is free because the taxpayer is paying for all of this. The taxpayer is shouldering all of this, but they like to phrase it like it's free because that makes things a lot more attractive to voters and to potential customers. And the idea, and they're not customers, they're beneficiaries, really. No, they're not paying for anything, except they earn their taxes. But that's a complicated road. The idea is that the Democrats wanted these ACA subsidies renewed. The reason they wanted this renewed was because this would essentially reverse everything Trump did in the Big Beautiful Bill. Earlier this year, the Democrats, of course, did not like the Big Beautiful Bill. They want to get everything reversed. This was their way of doing it. They were sneaking this into the continuing resolution, and then they were not going to vote yes on the continuing resolution until Republicans ceded and allowed them to put that in the CR. Well, of course, Republicans weren't going to do that. So here's what the Democrats got. The Democrats came over on Sunday night. They got the promise. They got a verbal promise made by John Thune that they would have a vote later on in December for ACA subsidies. The full Senate would vote on it to extend the ACA subsidies. Now, the problem here is, of course, this promise is not in writing. So there's no legal guarantee that it'll ever actually take place. And if it does take place, there's no way it's ever going to pass because the Senate is Republican controlled. And in the event that they vote on the ACA subsidies extension later in December, they don't need to break a filibuster like they do now. So there will be no way for the Democrats to stop them, and the Republicans are just going to shoot it down. If the Republicans in the Senate did not manage to shoot it down, it would then have to go to the House before it could be passed and actually signed into law. The House is also fiercely Republican, and the House is not going to let that pass, and it's ridiculous to think it could ever get past the House. If for some insane reason it did get past the House, which it isn't, but if for some insane reason it got past the House, it would then have to be signed by Trump in order to become law. Trump is not going to sign that. This would be a reversal of everything he worked so hard for in the big beautiful bill. Okay, so this bill, there's no possible situation in which the ACA subsidies extension actually gets passed, but they did come over and they betrayed their party just on the promise of the vote for reasons that we'll talk about later on. It's essentially, this was a pinky promise, and not a very solid one at that. Now, what did the Democrats not get in this? Well, first off, they didn't get an ACA subsidy extension, which was the whole reason they were holding out for the 40 days in the first place. They didn't, there's no, there's no guarantee the vote was going to pass the Senate. There's no guarantee it's going to pass the House. And it's not like there's no guarantee. It's not going to pass the Senate. It's not going to pass the House. So in reality, this was like a complete surrender of the Democrats. And it's an interesting political move, but there are reasons for it, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Okay, so why did the Democrats actually surrender on this? Because this is a little mystifying. It doesn't seem like there's any logical reason to surrender over this. There's no logical reason to come over and start voting with Republicans. So why did they do it? Here's the answer. First off, we need to talk about three. There's actually three different answers to it. They all contributed to, one main reason, but there's three answers. The first answer is that Trump dug in. He dug in really, really hard. He increasingly opposed ACA subsidies. He made it clear that he was not going to budge. Okay, this guy is a hard New York businessman who is very used to having to cut deals with people who would stab him in the back if they got a chance, like the Democrats would love to do. So he's not dumb, and he did not give them an inch, which is exactly what he should have done. I support him 100% in this. And he made it very clear that he was just not going to budge. He's not going to negotiate with terrorists. If you're going to hold the country hostage, we are not going to negotiate with you. It's that simple, full stop. And Trump did an amazing job of exemplifying this. In case anyone was wondering, this is what a real president looked like. He went so far. So remember when he called to end the filibuster? Remember when he called to resort to this nuclear option in the United States Senate rulebook that would essentially allow the Republicans to force an end to the filibuster, which could come back years later down the road and bite them very, very hard. Like it would come back at them almost guaranteed. The next time Democrats got control, very bad things would happen. Trump, obviously I'm not going to go so far as to say like I know this is what his intentions were, like 100%, but I'm fairly certain now he was not saying that because he was serious. He didn't want to actually get rid of the filibuster. That whole thing was political messaging. It was saying, I am not going to surrender, and I will blow up the Senate rulebook before I will surrender. We will resort to the nuclear option first because we are not going to negotiate with terrorists here. And that's fantastic messaging. Democrats gave in not long afterwards. So it looks like it worked. They had to fold. They physically had to fold. They could not hold out forever, and the Republicans were not moving an inch. Now, the second reason, the politics of this all and the messaging, and this is a little wild, okay? The media said that shutdowns were helping Democrats win in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City. So they were winning, but they still caved? Why? Okay, well, here's a breakdown. The wins don't actually mean that the shutdown was helping the Democrats. These wins, almost without exception, the only exception would be Virginia with Abigail Spanberger and Jay Jones. But aside from Virginia, every single state where elections were held, every single city where elections were held, and even in California and other areas where there were special elections like what we had with Prop 50 here, in New York City with Zohran Mamdani, and in New Jersey with Mikey Sherrill, in obviously, I already mentioned Virginia with Abigail Spanberger and Jay Jones. These were states that were already purple or blue. These were areas, I should say, because not all of them were states. These were areas that were already purple or blue. Republicans are kind of shocked at this Democrat victory, and the reason is that, in my opinion, we're all coming down off a high, essentially, after the 2024 election. The 2024 election smacked us in the face and said, we can win. We can actually win. We can win back the White House. We can win back the entire federal government. We can win back every single swing state like we saw in the 2024 presidential election, and there is hope left for the country. And of course, that's extremely exhilarating. That's extremely exciting. And the mind, I think, of a lot of Republicans in the country and a lot of conservatives turn to, well, if we won like that and by such a huge margin, we're going to take the 2026 midterms and we're going to do it in style. and we're going to take the 2025 off-year elections like we just saw. We're going to do it in style. That didn't happen. But again, this was not necessarily because the Republicans had bad candidates that they put up. Jack Ciattarelli was a fantastic candidate. Okay, New York City had a total lack of good candidates. Zohran Mamdani is about the worst candidate in the nation. After the 2024 election with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you might say to me, Carson, how is that even possible? Trust me, it's possible. It gets worse. Okay, Zohran is possibly the worst political candidate for political office in the nation, and probably one of the worst that's ever come on the scene. Okay. So we had him, and then there was Andrew Cuomo, who's an absolute joke. I find it hilarious that like Donald Trump was endorsing Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo is really disgusting. He's a Democrat. He's a far, far leftist, but yet he's still better than Zohran Mamdani. But even out of those two, there is no good outcome there. Okay, there is a slightly less worse outcome. There is a slightly less bad outcome, and that would be to elect Andrew Cuomo. But those two aren't good. And the Republican candidate, Curtis Lewa, he's an absolute joke. Okay, he has some decent policy ideas. I'll give him that. But he's also a New York conservative, which means he's in reality an extremely moderate conservative who really leans left. And he spent his time running around subways, I guess, with a red beret with his Guardian Angels group. That's like this alt police force that like protects people on the subways, and it sounds like he sounds like a wannabe superhero. Okay, I hate to have to say that, but that's really what it sounds like. Okay, he's not a good candidate. He's a goofball. All right, and he only got 8% of the vote. No one liked him anyways, and he was never going to win in New York City, a city that has historically leaned blue for a very, very long time. Okay, so New York was already set. New York was going to go blue. Same with Virginia. Virginia was going purple. New Jersey has always been blue. Okay, so there shouldn't be any surprise there. California is one of the worst, deepest blue states in the nation. We shouldn't have really had any hope to begin with that Prop 50 would not pass. Of course, Prop 50 passed, and they're now cheating on elections here, which is fun. I love living in the state. But what we need to realize, what we need to recognize, and what we need to appreciate is that the Republican expectation that we were going to win back all those blue states and all those super blue areas like New York City and New Jersey and California was a ridiculous proposition. It was a ridiculous idea, and there was no way we were ever going to win those back in just the 2025 off-year elections. Now, does that spell doom for the 2026 midterms? No, I don't think it spells doom at all. Again, this is a sampling of extremely blue areas. If you wanted a fair sampling of how Republicans are doing right now, you would need to equally mix blue and red areas that were very red and very blue, and then areas in the middle that were kind of purple. In order to get a fair sampling, these were all blue areas. Of course, Democrats are going to win. So again, this was not about bad GOP candidates. This was not about the shutdown. The Democrats lied about that. The media lied about that. These elections were not won as a result of the shutdown. In fact, new polls coming out are showing that the American people are blaming the Democrats more for the shutdown than the Republicans, because the old saying, you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you. Well, here's the thing. All of a sudden, politics starts caring about you. When you're a federal worker or you're a military member and you're apolitical, you've never really gotten to politics before, but all of a sudden you can't eat and you can't go to the store and buy food because your paycheck just disappeared. All of a sudden, you're very interested in politics. So what's the first thing you do? You get online and you see a lot of very intelligent people online telling you the truth about, the Republicans are the ones voting yes on this. The Democrats are the ones voting no on this. Who's on your side here? Obviously, the Republicans are the ones trying to get it through. They're trying to get you paid. Therefore, they are on your side. And then they can go to Senate.gov or House.gov. They can look at the actual vote tally themselves. See, the Republicans are the ones voting yes. The Democrats are the ones voting no. And holding up the entire country and the progress of the government just because of this political tizzy they're having, okay? Which is just insane, by the way, that they have the audacity to do this. So a lot of people, support is swinging towards the Republicans. Every day that the shutdown went on was getting worse and worse for the Democrats. And a lot of people pointed that out. They didn't care. They just kept going. And then eventually they had to cave. Now, there is one interesting advantage the Democrats might have in future elections. The promise of a December ACA subsidies vote was a bit of a Hail Mary, but it was an intelligent Hail Mary. And I'm going to explain why. In future elections, they can point back to this ACA subsidies vote, which is almost certainly going to fail, like 99.9% chance going to fail, and just say, use it as more evidence that the Republicans don't want you to have health care. They don't want you to have all these things, and they can make it seem hypocritical. The Republicans want to fund the government, but they don't want to give you health care. That kind of thing, right? And it might swing over some of the support the Republicans got during the shutdown to the Democrats in future elections, like in 2026 and 2028, in 2030. But we will see what happens. Of course, this is going to be used as campaign sound bites, campaign ad sound bites, like just 100%. I guarantee they're going to use it if this goes through and a vote even actually happens. It's grasping for straws. It's definitely grasping for straws. It's not a great attempt. But hey, they're in a really bad position, and this is about the best they can do. And it was like I said, it was a Hail Mary. Now, the third reason that the Democrats gave in is that the federal worker pressure really just became unbearable. It turns out that people enjoy their paychecks, and it turns out that people enjoy being paid. Aircraft traffic controllers had missed 2 paychecks so far. Airlines were canceling tons of flights. Military families were going to food pantries, which is something that military families should never have to do. If these men and women are going to put their lives on the line for our nation, we should at least take care of them. That should be just a given across the board. Military families were going to food pantries like crazy. There was one food pantry in Kansas that reported a 300% increase in military families needing help. And it was just, big problem. Tim Kaine said, quote, Tim Kaine is a senator, Democrat senator that came over. He said, quote, no guarantee waiting gets better result, but it is a guarantee that it causes suffering, end quote. Yeah. So explain to me why you did this in the first place, if this has been your philosophy all along. And the truth is that it hasn't been his philosophy all along. He's a spineless, he's absolutely spineless. He just wants power. He literally just wants power. And as soon as he sees that power slipping away from him, his chance at the 2026 midterms, the 2028 elections, general election, and the 2020 and the 2030 midterms slipping away, he lost it. And he lost all control, and he just caved, buckled like that. This is how you get to these people. They don't care about their constituents. They don't care about literally anything but their own power. It's unbelievably sad, but it's very, very true. And of course, Tim Kaine also comes from a state, Virginia, that has a lot of military families and a lot of federal workers. So I'm sure he was getting a lot of pressure on him. So the translation is that they were losing, and he's spinning surrender as compassion. If he really believed that, if he really believed he was causing suffering, he would not have gone the full 40 days like that. Now, Democrats blinked. They had 41 days to extract concessions. All they got was a verbal promise. Even Democrat Representative Jolie Johnson from Texas said, quote, Senate Dems caved and the pinky swear is not good enough, end quote. Their own party is unbelievably furious at them. Okay, their own party is turning in on itself. The Democrat Party is just in chaos right now. Everyone's calling for Chuck Schumer to resign. Everyone's calling for a bunch of people to resign. Everybody hates everybody, and it's just, the insults are flying, and they're in disarray at the moment. And the Republicans, meanwhile, really are not doing much better with the whole split over the Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes episode, but at least they're not this disunited. Trump's negotiating strength was put on display, and it's really galvanized a lot of people, a lot of Republicans in government who are seeing, okay, this is a real president. This is Dad is back in the house. Okay, there's a man in the White House again, and he's doing a very, very good job. We can compare this to the 2013 and the 2018 and 2019 GOP cave-ins, Republican cave-ins. They didn't cave this time. This time they are playing for keeps. Trump said no, he meant no, and Democrats had to eventually run up against a wall and accept reality. The government is open now, in spite of what the Democrats wanted. And the government is open now because they surrendered. Now, again, we can go back to the electoral victories nonsense and just destroy it even more. The Democrats claimed that their electoral wins in Virginia and in New Jersey and in New York and in California and other places gave them newfound confidence to fight. Then why would you immediately surrender? If it gave you newfound confidence to fight, why would you immediately surrender? If voters are punishing Republicans for this, why would you cave? Again, the answer is because the wins don't equal the shutdown. The wins are not were not caused by the shutdown. The wins were caused by the fact that those were already blue places to begin with, and they were going to get elected almost no matter what. They're totally lying when they say the shutdown helped. And of course, the media is assisting them in that pernicious lie. And if it helped, they would have just kept going, but they didn't. And of course, these people care about nothing but political power. So they stopped. And because they stopped, you can rest assured that that means the shutdown did not help them politically in any way at all. And it was actively hurting them politically. Now, federal workers are getting back pay, and they have been getting back pay the whole time. The Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019 guaranteed back pay. So all of the sob stories, well, those people, they're getting money now that the government has reopened. Yes, waiting sucked. Waiting was hard. Waiting may have hurt them, but it was not permanent harm. The Democrats used workers as hostages for Obamacare. Republicans wanted to open the government. Democrats wanted concessions first. Who actually held the workers hostage? Now we know. And the next time your Democrat friend says, who cares about the working class in America? The Republicans care about the working class in America. Democrats do not care about the working class. They care about power. They use the working class as a shield and as a ploy to gain more power. ACA subsidies should not be extended. They make insurance artificially cheap. They cost taxpayers billions. They're supposed to only be temporary. Now the Democrats want permanent ACA subsidies. Why should taxpayers subsidize this indefinitely? It's a really, really, really bad idea. It drives prices through the floor. It makes healthcare far worse and far less affordable. Now the government is paying for it. And of course, when we say the government is paying for something, that means you're paying for it because you're the taxpayer. All it does is hides the cost, it hides the bill, and it makes a bunch of other people in America pay for the healthcare of one group of people that cannot pay for it themselves. Why should taxpayers just subsidize this indefinitely? And the answer is they shouldn't. This is pure wealth redistribution and welfare. So the ACA subsidies thing was already a bad idea to begin with, and we are very lucky it did not go through. Plus, it would have driven the national debt up much, much further than it already is driven up, and it is in the trillions of dollars right now. It is climbing at an unbelievable rate every day. So very bad thing. Okay, so that's all what's going on. But now that the government is actually reopened, what happens next? Well, the government is now operating normally. Federal workers are going to get their back pay. It could be within 48 hours. Flights are back to normal, and military families are no longer relying on food banks. In mid-December, the Senate is going to maybe vote on ACA subsidies. It's not going to pass the Senate. It is definitely not going to pass the House, and Trump is not going to sign it. This is where Dems are going to get their campaign footage. On January 30th, the continuing resolution is going to expire again. Democrats are definitely not ruling out another shutdown. We may be doing this again in 10 weeks, which is a pretty terrifying thought, but we'll see. But now SNAP is funded through September, so Democrats don't have that leverage. They can't hit Trump over the head with the SNAP thing anymore. It is funded through September, so good luck with that. This one was a pretty bad one. And the American people did not react in favor of the Democrats. They reacted very much not in favor of the Democrats. Here's the big picture. There is no real budget that we have. We only have these continuing resolutions. This is governing by crisis, and it's continuing, and both the Republicans and the Democrats are at fault in this. This is not how the government should be run. There should be appropriations bills passed every month, small appropriations bills that everyone can read and debate instead of just one big one passed every year. And then when they can't agree on one big one, they just immediately go into crisis mode and just start passing continuing resolution after continuing resolution after continuing resolution. But Democrats did just prove that they are willing to blink first in all of this. So a future shutdown, like I said, is not going to go well. It's not going to go well with them. So here's the bottom line. The government is open. After 41 days, the longest shutdown in American history. Federal workers are getting paid right now. The crisis is over, and Democrats got nothing except a promise of a vote that is going to fail. Trump won. He didn't blink. Republicans held firm, and Democrats caved despite electoral momentum, quote unquote. This is what happened. The government reopened on GOP terms. The government reopened on Republican terms. Republicans are the people in Congress who actually care about you, and they're doing their job. And they reopened the government so that federal workers would be paid, military families would be paid. Again, this is what real negotiation looks like. Okay, no more cave-ins, no more giving Democrats what they want for headlines. Trump stood firm. The Democrats folded. Remember this. Democrats shut down the government 41 days for Obamacare subsidies. They kept workers unpaid. They delayed flights. They forced military families to go to food banks, and they got nothing for it. That's why the government is open now. Next time the Democrats lecture about caring for working people, again, remember who just did this. In January, we may be doing this all over again, but based on what just happened, the Democrats, I think, are going to be scared to do it because they know they will lose again. The government is back open because Democrats surrendered. That's your takeaway from this episode. Thank you so much for listening to The Carson Wagner Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please give me a 5-star rating across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. You can also go to Substack, thecarsonwagnershow.substack.com, and sign up to receive emails every time I drop a new episode. Feel free to share the show with anyone you think might be interested. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.